I think about after school time, and I grew up in like the 70s, and after school time meant you were just, you had the key around your neck and you went home and you hung out and you had a basement rumpus room or something. And then as you got older, then you went to the park and maybe smoked a little weed and got into trouble. This is the Bounce Back Generation podcast. I'm Jennifer Dillon. This podcast brings you powerful stories and insights that inspire personal growth in today's complex world. Through conversations with experts and regular people, we explore diverse topics from navigating grief to harnessing personal power, all with the goal of uplifting and empowering listeners to thrive no matter the challenge you face. I'm the founder of Bounce Back Generation, which is a nonprofit serving high-stress, low-income communities in the San Francisco Bay Area. My guest today is Shawna Rosenzweig. She is the president of Campfire, with over a decade of experience in positive youth development. Since joining Campfire in 2013, she has led transformative culture and leadership efforts and launched DEIA initiatives to foster inclusivity across the organization. Previously, she worked with the Thrive Foundation for Youth, Global Kids in New York City, and various Middle Eastern organizations promoting conflict resolution among teens. Shawna holds a master's in curriculum and instruction from UW-Madison and lives in Seattle with her wife, Steph, their 2 children, and 2 dogs. And today we're going to explore after school time. You may think that it's not that important to know what kids are doing after school, or maybe you think it's really important to know what kids are doing after school. The point of this is to understand how after-school programs are helping kids to get through whatever they lost during COVID. But one of the most important things is that after-school time can be a very lonely time for a lot of kids. And we're going to talk about the impact of loneliness to our kids and how that's impacting how they make decisions later on in life. So after school time is different now. And tell me a little bit about what it looks like now.
Yeah, so after school time today can look like many things, right? And so for some young people, it's going to a different space, right? A different physical space than the school building, right? And so that may be going to, a campfire or a boys and girls club or a Y, right? Or many other organizations, including, many fantastic local organizations. So it could be a physical transition of space, right? To another setting. For other young people, it may be a continuation in your school building, but with different adults, right? An opportunity to be interacting with young people of different ages that, again, may attend your school, but maybe you don't have the chance to be with in your classroom during the kind of formal school day. For other young people, I think we should be real about what the situation is, right? For half of all the young people in the United States, they don't have an after school program to go to, right? They don't have access.
You and me, with the work that we do, we are 100% convinced that this is not only wonderful for kids to have, but if you don't have it, we see the results of what happens when kids don't have that time after school. In our organization, we deal with trauma, we deal with violence, perpetrated by kids and felt by kids. They become victims and perpetrators. There is negative health impacts. There's substance abuse that comes up. There's bullying. There's loneliness and depression and anxiety. So how do you talk to people who say, well, I don't know if I want to increase my taxes in order to support something like that?
So I think kind of a few things in this area. One is the opportunity to kind of reframe how we talk about both, the benefits and, as you named, right, the potential negative impact of not having out of school time experiences. And I think, historically, we haven't always thought of, things like loneliness as being significant health risks. And I think there is a real moment of opportunity. Again, the U.S. Surgeon General, I think, doing a great job in highlighting some of these risks, right? That loneliness is as big, if not bigger, of a predictor of early death than cancer,
Right.
or obesity. And yet we don't think of them in the same light, and they're not funded the same ways. Right. And I think this is, both the challenge and the opportunity for organizations in the out of school time space to really make the case, right? And beyond, to be able to make the case that this will have lifelong health impacts that will cost a lot more money, right? Long term,
Yes.
than, the preventative act now. And I think we now think about that with things like smoking and tobacco use, right? Or
I was just going to say that substitute loneliness for teen smoking,
yeah,
and you get the point. Yeah.
right. So I think there's certainly a communications piece to be learned here. And again, but that really takes acknowledging that there is a significant health risk, and I think, and that certainly applies to young people, but it also goes beyond young people, right? The Surgeon General just released the latest, health risk warning around parents, that the parents are not okay right now, right? And are facing so much stress, mental health challenges, et cetera. And recognizing that out of school time programs certainly give young people a place to go, but they really support an entire family or group, right? In some way, that it's support for, I think about where, we as Campfire have relationships. It's support for teachers and paraprofessionals and school administrators. It's support for, right, the families, the caregivers, the siblings, and how all those pieces work together. The school nurses, right? How that connects to our camp nurses. We talk a lot about the transition of care, right? Whether it's from school to after school, or from school year into summer into the school year again, that there's a real opportunity to be making sure that young people and their families are supported and cared for throughout those moments of transition. And
Yeah.
I think we expect so many young people to work through so many transitions, even if it's just that moment when the school bell rings, by themselves, and to help them
Yes.
navigate. And
Yeah.
so I think we're always stronger as a web of support, and so, certainly when, I look at the work we do at Campfire, we will never be everything to everyone, nor would I want us to be, right? And it's those relationships with the, the healthcare providers, with whether it's the school nurse or the camp nurse, or it's the relationships with the food service providers, ensuring that young people have access to healthy snacks and meals.
So it's really about building like a network around kids that's, lots of different, people that are involved in lots of different ways and have different perspectives on what's going on with the kid. There was an article recently in the Washington Post that talked about the school shooter in Georgia, the latest one, and both his parents were um, uh, dealing with substance use. There was some violence in the home. There was a separation. I mean, the adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs there were just off the charts. And contrary to, what I think a lot of people think, is that this kid wasn't there. There were warning signs that people did pick up on. Teachers picked up on it. The school picked up. The school called the police, let them know, months prior, that he was talking about being a school shooter. He had talked on Discord with, and someone had called him in. But the problem seems to be that we go hot and cold. So there either is no care or there's police involvement. And then the police are saying, look, there's really nothing we can do if the kid says, no, I didn't really mean it. And they talked to the dad, and the dad said, yeah, I have guns, but he'll never get a hold of my guns. What are you going to do? So the after school programs and that network you're talking about builds these structures around, so that there are intermediary things that could have been done, just if nothing else, to keep the kid from feeling like he kept crying out for help and nobody was hearing him, which is also what happened with the other school shooter. His parents were both sent to prison for their neglect of his cries for help. So I think that requires, though, people to think of after school programs and the work that you do as being, kind of nanny state, as people will say that. How do you respond to those kinds of criticisms of the work that people are out there doing?
Yeah. So after school programs truly, right, are more than childcare. Yes, they're childcare, right? That serves an important role again for many working parents. And they're really intentional spaces, right? They're intentional spaces for learning, right? They're intentional spaces for homework help. They're intentional spaces for physical activity. They're, you know, they're important spaces for career exposure, right? For seeing something, seeing a different future for yourself than maybe what you thought was possible previously. And they're also a space to just be, right? And I think, we know young people are highly scheduled. And we talk a lot when we talk about thriving. We're very fortunate to work with Dr. Kia Darling Hammond and apply a lot of her research on thriving to our work. And, one of the things that in building that framework that young people identified as being crucial is having space to just be. And whether that's to just be themselves, to relax, to laugh, right? To be building relationships, right? We talk about the in-between times as being really important moments in developing, a lot of the social and emotional skills that we hope young people, we might call them coping skills, right? But the self-care skills that, we want everyone to have, right? We're all better off when we have those skills. And so
You brought up something that I think sometimes I think about with all of that, open time that I had growing up, and me and my brothers, we basically took care of ourselves, and then we had like a paper route, and we did all this stuff. But one thing that we did do was we kind of developed the art of hanging out, just not doing anything, not having to be anywhere, just lay on the couch and talking or watching the TV together or whatever, or with friends. Are we structuring kids too much? Is there too much scheduling in? Now you got to go to school, then you got to go to after school program, and then, maybe you have sports after that. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's very kid dependent, right? I mean, I think about my own two kids and who are very different from each other, right? And one of them is much happier in having a lot more hangout space and a lot less structure. And the other one really thrives in structure, and that's
Right.
where he's happiest. So I think having, again, the range of options and spaces, when it comes to campfire programs, yes, we're intentional about building in some of that hangout time, right? And people may not always realize that's what it is, right? But the chance to be, at your after school program playing a game of pickup basketball, right? Maybe that's your first time to actually hold a basketball outside of a PE class, right? Or to have fun or to develop a new friendship with someone in that setting, or the Gaga pit, right? Or whatever, or to be reading a new book and then maybe talking to a friend about it, or seeing an adult that looks like you, holds the same identity that you hold in some way, right? And building a relationship and seeing what's possible for
Yeah.
yourself. And I think those are really important aspects of the program.
What exactly are you doing to ensure that there is that seamless connection from school to whatever after school programs? And then I imagine that you've got a whole network of a lot of different organizations that do after school programs, and then you're connecting them up. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so it'll look different in every community, really based off of the needs of young people in that space. So, Campfire's sweet spot has always been supporting young people who have been historically excluded in some way. So when we were founded as Campfire Girls, over 100 years ago, it was because young women didn't have the opportunity to be outdoors. Today, right, that's evolved and looks very different. In some communities, it's supporting LGBTQ plus young people. And so we may do that work through a gender and sexualities alliance. In other communities, it may be young people who are neurodiverse. And so it's creating opportunities for neurodynamic young people to have after school programs or summer options.
What are you finding in terms of maybe differences in kids who don't have after school programs that they can go to versus the ones that do?
We look at a wide range of, social, emotional skills, perspectives, really both from program experience as well as personal skill development. And that's really designed to intentionally be a feedback loop for young people to have voice in shaping our programs, right? And to be telling us where they're growing. Recently we were just looking at some results from some of our programs and of that group self-management. So for young people to be able to manage their emotions, to, recognizing, right? None of us, adults or young people, are going to be regulated all the time. But what happens when you become unregulated? Like, do you have the skills, the strategies to re-regulate? in that moment, right? Before it escalates to, substance abuse, to violence, et cetera. And so, yeah, that was an area where we were really excited and proud of the work we were doing. It's also, again, in thinking about the person-to-person interactions, I always say one of my favorite questions when we look at outcomes is looking at, did you have the chance to interact with someone who is different from you? As we all know, election season, right, live in a very politically polarized environment right now. So even the chance to be building relationships across differences.
Talk a little bit about the equity part. There's a lot of kind of facets to equity. There's the fact that someone can't afford that after school time, their parents can't afford it, or it's not accessible in their area, but also that there are a lot of kids who don't learn in school the same way that others do. And the thing that got them through was that they had, that after school program where they did drama or they had a sport. So how do we level the playing field financially, but also in terms of some differences in learning? I mean, there's so many different kinds of kids. How do we do this and do it in a way that includes everybody?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it starts at the policy level, right? At the federal policy level. And, there's a number of legislation, there's some newly introduced legislation around summer for all, and again, so looking at different opportunities where we can be encouraging and directing federal funds to support after school and summer programs for young people, right? So there's kind of that takes away the initial cost barrier potentially to access. There's also transportation issues, right? That's another one of kind of the top 3 issues that caregivers identify as why their young person is not able to participate in after school or summer programs. They simply are unable to get there. Another one is lack of awareness or lack of interest, right? And again, so how do we make sure that young people, right, that and their caregivers are aware of really, again, the range of programs and options and activities that are out there, right? I always say you can't care about it if you don't know about it. So maybe a young person is really passionate about music, but they don't have a music program in their school. But they don't know that, there's an amazing organization that all they do is music, with young people in their community, and they could have access to it, at no cost, but they simply aren't aware. So there's a big opportunity around awareness. And I think lastly, building those relationships with schools, right? At Campfire, we talk a lot about the opportunity to be collaborating both across, community-based organizations, but also collaborating with schools, right? Recess is, the number one source of conflict, right? That spills over into the classroom and ends up utilizing administrators' time, et cetera. We're thrilled to be partnering with Playworks, who really does have an expertise in play and recess, to see what role Campfire can play, right? So that young people, again, they're learning about it, they're building those relationships with other adults in their lives and are able to transfer that to the out of school time hours as well.
So just really quickly, tell me a little bit about Campfire and some of your background. And then I want to ask you about, it's great. You're going to tell us all the great things that Campfire can do and after school programs can do. But oftentimes I find that what people respond to is, what if you didn't have it? What is the dark side of not having that? Because that's what really gets people and policymakers, I think, to respond.
Sure. Do you want me to tell you about myself first?
Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. So, so Campfire, I'll start there. So at Campfire, we know growing up is hard, right? And that's why Campfire connects young people to the outdoors, to others, and to themselves. So we believe that all young people deserve the opportunity to thrive, and we really build out and support them to develop their capacity to thrive in right, those 3 different ways. So, but we know, right, after school and summer spaces are a great space for young people to really perceive themselves in different light around what their potential is when it comes to STEM learning and STEM careers. So that's a bit about Campfire. We work in all kinds of different settings, right? From the school building to overnight camp spaces and everywhere in between. And we have, 46 affiliates across 25 states plus DC. So we're fortunate to serve over 100,000 young people through our programs and support them and their families every year. So in terms of me and kind of how I got into this work, I I started out working in after school programs as my high school job, right? My mom saw some sort of benefit to probably not having me hang around the house, right? As you describe in those after school hours, and said, hey, maybe go get a job, like go find something to do after school and during those summer hours. And so, I started working at day camps at our local Parks and Rec, and a former physical education teacher of mine said, hey, I got a sports-based after school program. Come work with me. And so truly that's where, I developed a love of working with young people in both of those settings. And as I went on to college, right, as I graduated high school and went to college, I only knew it as my school job, right? I found another after school program near the university I was attending. And again, that's how I paid my way through college. But I thought if you wanted to work with young people and make a career out of it, you had to become a classroom teacher.
Right.
And so that's what I planned to do. And I was really fortunate towards the end of my time in college, just by chance, decided to go earn a few extra points in an after school or in an extra credit assignment, and attended this documentary film about this summer camp in Maine that takes high school students from different regions and conflict around the world and uses in a summer camp setting to build belonging in young people who have, only been taught to see each other as their enemies, and build relationships and explore conflict resolution, right? And in this camp setting.
Actually, can you give us the name of the documentary? I think I've seen it.
Yeah, it was called Seeds, and the organization is Seeds of Peace.
Yeah. And they bring Israeli and Palestinian kids together. Yeah,
and they
it's
have
just
Southeast Asia
amazing.
program as well. So for Indian, Pakistani, Afghani as well.
The whole world needs an after school program, frankly. I love
Yes,
that.
absolutely.
Right now.
Yeah.
How has COVID affected after school time?
Yeah. So I think COVID, one way that it affected after school time is it really shifted it from a nice to have to a need to have.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is, COVID or after school programs, I think, became essential during COVID. As schools were shutting down. Actually, I was just hearing this example earlier from our CEO in Kansas City, talking about the role that they played working with other community-based organizations, their local Y, their local Boys and Girls Club, and Campfire really played a role in creating community learning hubs for young people, right? For essential workers that were unable to be home with their kids as school had shut down.
Right.
It was creating a physical space where young people could go to participate in their schooling, right? To be building those, peer-to-peer relationships, those near-peer relationships, those peer-to-adult relationships that, so many young people and adults lost during that time.
Yeah.
And so, I think at a very kind of real, immediate level, it was after school programs that stepped in and said, hey, we're the ones that can create these safe spaces, literally and figuratively for young people during this time. And I think, as we've, gone back into school buildings and, and transitioned out of, kind of that period when everything was shut down, there's a lot of ways where we've had to work to close the gaps, whether it's learning loss, mental health, but supporting the, social, emotional well-being of young people, right? We use MESH as our acronym, but the mental, emotional, and social health of young people.
Mm-hmm.
After school programs continue to play a huge, huge role in that, and I think we also need to be, real in that there's a lot of young people that don't have access for the reasons we named earlier. And there's a lot of young people that, again, I think we've become comfortable with a new scenario, right? Where, okay, I'm physically here, I'm on my computer working, but okay, it's safe for my kid to be home. And so a lot of young people haven't gone back to after school programs.
What if somebody says, I really want my kid to go to after school programs, but I can't afford them?
Yeah. So there's a number of different ways that we respond to that. So one is we always look within our Campfire programs to find kind of multiple pathways into the program, whether it's, sliding scale of cost, that we're presenting kind of the real cost and the cost if you can pay more and the cost if if it helps to have that subsidized, looking at things like, what we call camperships, scholarships, et cetera. But there's also looking at ways to close the gaps, right? So, maybe there's a way that, federal dollars, state dollars, local dollars can cover the tuition, but there may also be materials needed, right? So in the summertime, that could be having a sleeping bag or a pillow or
Right.
rain boots, and after school, if it's music, maybe it's access to an instrument, or in sports, like the equipment.
I always tell parents, go to the after school program and say, I can't pay this amount. Do you have a scholarship? Do you have a grant program? Do you have a sliding scale? Could I do some volunteer time? Do stuff like that. Don't assume that just because, it costs $120 a week or whatever, that's always the cost for everybody. And it's so worth it. Um, yeah, there was something else that you brought up that I wanted to touch on, but my brain these days, I just forget everything. I don't know. That's
Yeah.
my post-COVID thing is like, what is going on? I think, I remember now, it actually has something to do with COVID, is I have a lot of friends who, and I notice this too, that there's a certain age where kids who were, at home were not having that social time, that they've never quite recovered those social skills. Some, the very young ones are okay, the older ones are okay, but there's this kind of middle to early high school that they just have a really hard time socially.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that if you notice in your kid and they're still in, middle school, high school, uh, check out a program, because it could really help to foster that. You can't assume that them back in school is necessarily a social time, because the schools don't really offer too much during school days. There's so many things that they have to do that they don't really have a lot of time to be social.
Right. I think oftentimes folks think of after school as maybe being for elementary kids, or K through 6 or 8 at best, right? We see across the board, right, across organizations, significant drop off when young people enter, middle school or junior high, and then even more drop off when they enter high school. However, right, there's, I think, both important for folks to know that there are many after school programs out there for middle school and high school students to be exactly exploring interests, right, building relationships, really, supporting their mental, emotional, their social health. And many times after school programs that do serve that younger population are often looking for, after school aids, or, offering paid
Right.
employment
Oh, right.
opportunities or summer employment opportunities. And it's a great opportunity to be building not only skills and experience that can transfer directly to a resume, but also so many of, again, those life skills, those leadership skills, those ways of interacting with others that you can't replicate anywhere else.
It's interesting because you're touching on some stuff that we've been really looking into a little more deeply, because our audience base is a little older. We go 16 to 25, so we're really looking at older kids. And there's two issues that I just want to really quickly get your thoughts on. One is something we call breaking free of the matrix, which is really looking at the inequities in our society and understanding how they are created structures, whether it's racial, gender, sexual orientation, that we live in this, kind of bubble where we think that those rules are the way things are. Yeah, we are different because our skin color is different. No, we're not. We're all just human beings. There's no genetic difference, etc., with all the other kind of ways in which we separate people. And I think you are touching on a lot of what after school programs can do to kind of help, to not kind of, to actually help kids see that matrix, because they have that opportunity in that after school time to not only see other opportunities for things they can do, but also different people. And a lot of after school programs are very conscious of creating an atmosphere where people feel that they can get along.
Designing for belonging, right? That you're never centering a young person or a group of young people as the problem that needs to be fixed, right? To your point about the matrix, it's the matrix that needs to be fixed or adjusted, right? It's the system. And so, yeah, how do we utilize the, whether it's the physical space, the program content, the experiences, to shift that perspective, right? To really design that for belonging, so that all young people, right, regardless of how they identify, feel feel welcomed and accepted for who they are, and right. And then I think it's once that foundation is set, yeah, then there's, I think an amazing opportunity. I think about a program we have called Teens in Action, where young people are able to critically look at an issue in their community and identify, an action step that they can collectively take
Yeah, I love
to
it.
address that, and it's not them by themselves, right? It's working kind of, how do you work within the current system to create something better, both now and in the future.
Yeah, and I think these kind of things get politicized, but it's not political. It's about getting along with other people and then saying, okay, how can we make this work? How can we compromise? How do we talk to each other in a different way? The second thing that has come up recently that we've been talking about is the rise of AI and technology and how that is going to really influence the kind of work that people do. And we did a podcast recently with someone who is naturally a STEM person. He was very good at calculus and physics, and he decided that that wasn't what he was going to do because he had different values. He liked to be around people and talk and be fun, and wanted to be a game show host, and the importance, I think, of as we step into this new age where we are literally making machines that are smarter than us, that we have to figure out how to train kids really to stay in the driver's seat, to not let them be taken by AI and technology to sit back and go, I don't know what I'm going to do, because they're going to take the job that I had, and start to be very creative. Be more human is the way I put it. And it sounds like you're saying that there's a lot about after school programs that do that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think back to one of my early jobs as an after school program facilitator, and in that moment, right, my boss was, I think it was like my first workshop that I was facilitating with a group of high school students in New York City. And the feedback I got from my boss was, your job is not to take knowledge from your head and instill it in young people's. It's really to facilitate them in an experience, right? Them to have their own aha moments, to come to their own understandings. And I think, in a lot of ways, we're seeing this with social media, right? To look on the bright side of it, there's certainly, challenges, mental health related pieces that are really important that we need to be addressing. But it's not an all or nothing, right? It's not like we're going to just get rid of cell phones tomorrow, or we're going to get rid of AI because the old way was better, right? We're not going to change anything in that way. Whereas supporting young people to both see their potential and how they learn to interact and adapt, right? That as young people move across social media platforms, right? Or, I mean, they're some of the best content creators out there right now, right? And really, again, talk about addressing community issues. Young people are truly shaping a lot of the narrative on really important issues of, their generation and future generations by utilizing some of this technology. Like, how can AI and technology fill your bucket? Are there moments where maybe you are able to connect with someone, for many non-binary and trans young people who may not know anyone in their physical community, there's some amazing safe spaces online where they suddenly feel connected. And so being able to think about, like, what are some of the practices, the behaviors that we want young people to be able to use to successfully navigate through these transitions, through these technological transitions, is, I think, key.
Yeah, because I think in the classroom there's a lot of teaching to the test, and that's a lot of, kind of just know this, just take this. And I think after school programs just by nature are more experiential. So you are creating a learning process where you are experiencing, and like you said, you're creating a platform where they get to have their own aha moment. So when we're worried that, oh well, they're just going to be able to turn to, chat GPT and ask the question, so they'll never really think, we can teach kids how to think for themselves, even though they can turn and use their phone as an additional tool in their toolbox. So yeah, it's very exciting. So I think you're doing really fantastic work, and I very much support it. If there's anything that we can do on our end to help with any advocacy or anything that you have, we would love to be involved. I did have one thing I wanted to mention to you. All right, reaching for something here.
While
You know,
you're doing
you
that, I
talk.
will say thank you and likewise. I mean, certainly, the work you're doing, amazing. And yeah, any way we can support, happy to.
Thank you. Well, this is what I was thinking. If you want to, we have this book called You and Stress and Owner's Manual. So it's free. That, if you want to let people know if there's some way that we can let them know, it's basically like a fill in your own stuff kind of book. And it's available online and we had one of our youth content creators did all the graphics and stuff. And it basically talks about, this is your nervous system. This is your nervous system on stress. This is how you calm it down. And then here's how you build resilience factors in your life. So if there's any way you can let your networks know about it, it's available for free to download, and they can print it on their own, or they can do an order with us. But that we would have to charge for that. So I would recommend that they download it on their own and just get it for free.
Yeah, absolutely. No, would be glad to promote that. And yeah, certainly an important resource to get in the hands of many, right? Whether it's young people or folks working with young people. My second grade used the term resilience the other day, right? He goes, was I resilient in that moment? Yes.
Wow.
Amazing that young people have this vocabulary, have this understanding. So, I mean, again, that's kudos to resources and materials like the ones you've created.
They are much more sensitive to their mental health, which is good and bad. It's good that they know, but it's also bad. Sometimes they over analyze themselves, and that can also be negative.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Bounce Back Generation podcast. Our future podcasts are going to be really great. You don't want to miss them. One of them is about the 988 crisis line. It's a new national crisis line, and we're going to talk about what happens when people call it. How do they get help? And we're going to talk with an expert on suicide and some of the signs to look for. We also are going to talk to someone who has adopted the van life, which is a way of living where you go out on long trips and live in your van. And she's found a way to really deal with a lot of the stress that she had in her professional life by taking these long sojourns. You're going to find her story really interesting. All right, we're looking forward to seeing you again. Please don't forget to follow us.